The man turned around, but before he could finish speaking, he sensed something unusual from behind, and his voice choked in panic. The attacker smiled coldly, confessing that he had coated the blade with Bushmaster's snake venom, a toxin that doesn't kill but makes the victim's life unbearable. The bespectacled man broke into a sweat, his eyes trembling as he realized the true identity of the assailant. Elsewhere, two men faced each other. One mentioned the name Chenggu and the Special Forces Unit, words enough to awaken long-buried memories. The long-haired man recalled the past, an unofficial unit founded by Junsu Beak, where Du Jong-han was chosen as the successor, while the others seemed to have been eliminated. The young man laughed, asserting that eliminating them was a huge waste. In a resource-poor country, the minimum is to make full use of human resources. The bearded old man coldly issued an ultimatum, resigned to preserve peace in the final years of life. His voice lowered but threatening. He challenged the other to find anyone brave enough to face Junsu Beak. Nameless, former Chenggu Special Forces No. 4, appeared with a sinister smile, affirming this was the first time they truly faced each other. In the kitchen, an unexpected confrontation unfolded. The one who had been hiding silently now revealed himself, while the opponent retreated in panic. The man trembled, realizing that the Bushmaster was a snake famous for its deadly neurotoxin, the very poison now coursing through his body. He screamed in anger and despair, suspecting that all these years Nameless had stayed by his side, only to spy on him under Chenggu's order. Nameless calmly admitted he was planted here indefinitely, but under a single condition for the surveillance mission. He closed his eyes slightly, smiling as if sharing a secret, that to leave here, he must fulfill an undisclosed condition. Pushed to the limit, the bespectacled man shouted in fury and threw a desperate punch at the traitor. A decisive slash sent blood splattering across the tiled floor. Nameless coldly ended the attack and declared the real objective, to track down the remaining loyalists. The wounded man was horrified to discover Nameless had vanished in the blink of an eye. He had been standing right in front of him just seconds before. Before he could react, blood sprayed violently from the second slash. Too fast, too ruthless. Nameless gave no second chance. Nameless coldly turned his back, casually twirling the blade on his finger and casually uttering a bland apology, as if the two slashes were nothing worth worrying about. His voice deepened, his eyes darkened. Now was the time to carry out the next mission, to take the young master's head. Under the clear sky, explosions and fierce clashes echoed. A new battle was beginning elsewhere. A dynamic young man hurled steel balls at a terrifying speed, shouting loudly as if playing baseball. But this was a deadly game. Dust rose as the young man in a suit darted through the barrage, his determined gaze and sharp, running posture cutting through the air. While moving, he marveled silently at the opponent's extraordinary throwing speed. Though not impossible to dodge, it was far from easy. The foreign man swung a metal baseball bat, blocking the steel ball hurtling toward him with tremendous force. He shouted, "Home run incoming," putting all his strength into the decisive hit as if it were a real baseball game. Taeha coldly dodged the strike, his sharp eyes still tracking the spiraling metal bullet like a whirlwind. He silently realized the terrifying thing wasn't just the power, but the relentless chain of attacks, leaving no opening for a counterattack. If he had a knife, this fight would have ended long ago. The man in red lowered his bat, admitting the 20 billion won bounty was not unreasonable. A person who could dodge his strike must be among Oseong's top 10. The other man stepped forward, mixing sarcasm with a warning. He suggested Taeha obediently follow them if he still wanted to keep his life. Taeha retorted sarcastic, his cold gaze fixed on the one who had just struck from behind, not forgetting to mention the iron bat from the start. The man in red sneered, stepping back to let his teammates approach, affirming their method of persuasion was violence, not words. Taeha maintained his calm demeanor, but his sharp eyes quietly assessed the situation and the danger surrounding him. The man in the green hat smiled slyly, revealing that their employer wanted to bring Taeha back alive, but wouldn't mind if he came back dead. Upon seeing the warrant, Taeha momentarily froze. He realized these people were not affiliated with Cheng-jin. While Taeha was still contemplating, Nameless suddenly appeared behind him, the cold blade hissing through the white smoke. Taeha quickly dodged the flashing sword from behind, his eyes flashing with alertness at the enemy's swift strike. The red-haired man smirked with delight as he saw Taeha evade the attack, his eyes gleaming with excitement as if toying with an intriguing prey. The man in red gasped angrily, shouting when he realized a stranger dared to interfere and touch their goods. Taeha's gaze followed the man who had just jumped into the fray, coldly asked, "Who are you?" The red-haired man laughed wildly, bowing as if greeting, then boldly declared, "I am the assassin sent to take your life." The man in the green hat frowned and cursed, annoyed to see an uninvited, persistent cockroach join the game. The man in red tightened his metal bat, ordering to kill both obstacles, no intention of negotiating anymore. The man in the green hat took a run-up, throwing with the force as if starting a real baseball game. The battle had officially begun. But instead of the intended target, his blade was cut off by Taeha. The young man coldly launched a precise counterattack. The man in the green hat's expression turned to panic. He couldn't believe the opponent was that fast. The red-haired man showed open contempt, calling him a cockroach, both insulting and intimidating, as if dismissing the presence of the weaker one. Caught off guard, the man threw the ball, screaming in pain. He called for backup in desperation as his arm was severely injured, losing all combat ability. The burly man in the red hoodie charged in a furious rage, shouting curses, intending to deliver a fatal punch to Taeha. Before he could strike, Taeha slashed across his chest with a sharp blow, blood splattering, ending it swiftly. Taeha coldly glanced down at his opponent, uttering a disdainful remark. "Shut up, you bloated maggot." Turning his back, Taeha casually continued, "I'm in a good mood. Stop whining and get out of sight." Amid the peaceful street scene, Taeha remained calm, the blood-stained sword still in hand. Nameless appeared, stepping closer. Nameless glanced at Taeha's outfit, his eyes cold. "Your clothes, you're the apprentice from that tavern, right?" Nameless looked toward the old tavern where Taeha once hid. He coldly asked, "Are you a spy? And what about the master inside?" Taeha shrugged with a faint smile, casually saying, "Who knows, probably dead by now. A poison strong enough to send a normal man to the grave," and he took 2 doses. Nameless clenched his fist in anger, silent but radiating murderous intent. Nameless spoke sternly, "You're following Ching Jin's orders, right? Here to track down the remaining loyalists." Taeha half smiled, nodding in acknowledgement. "Yes, and I thought I'd rot here forever, until you appeared and freed me from that miserable fate." Taeha slowly walked away, his tone full of sarcasm. "That so-called loyal faction. Except for that old man, no one else remains. But I endured, waited, and gritted my teeth through this hopeless mission." Suddenly, Taeha lunged forward, his eyes full of killing intent. He was waiting for this exact moment, to kill Doojeong Han and seize Junsu Beek's throne, the one who betrayed him. Nameless remained calm but alert, his cold eyes locked onto the sword about to strike, ready to confront. Elsewhere in a brightly lit room, Gwang-hoo Yang, the acting vice-chairman of Chinggu, stood silently before the window, contemplative amid the quiet and power. A memory resurfaced. Jin Ching once said with strange confidence, "If not, then find someone strong enough to face Junsu Beek." Gwang-hoo Yang laughed scornfully. How foolish. His naivety truly knows no bounds. His eyes widened with suspicion. Planting someone strong enough to take down Junsu Beek right under his nose without being detected. Impossible. Gwang-hoo Yang spoke in a low voice, analyzing. The other had deliberately pretended ignorance, acting as if nothing was worth reacting to, even though he was Junsu Beek's close deputy commander. Taeha stood still, his gaze icy, watching Nameless rushing forward like a living arrow. In Taeha's sharp pupils, the image of Nameless closing in appeared clearly, accompanied by a murderous aura. Nameless roared angrily, his fist descending with full force, aiming to end everything in a single blow. Taeha remained terrifyingly calm, gently speaking, "Gwangsu, give me the knife." At that moment, Gwangsu shattered the glass from above, his body like a meteor crashing down, officially joining the fight. Gwangsu was badly injured, blood soaking his collar, yet his eyes remained focused as he tightly held the intruder who broke the glass with a fierce collision. Gwangsu and the enemy crashed into Nameless, blocking the attack, while Taeha stood firm, silently observing. A sudden explosion echoed through the street, dust flying everywhere, the chaotic situation abruptly disrupted. Taeha did not hesitate. He drew 2 knives from Gwangsu, his eyes cold as ice, ready to seize the initiative. Gwangsu groaned softly, whispering something weakly, blood still dripping from the corner of his mouth, but his gaze never faltered. Taeha nodded slightly. "I understand," he said with a serious look. "Now rest for a while." Gwangsu collapsed onto the pavement, blood spreading on the cold concrete. He was exhausted after the fierce battle. Nameless took advantage of that moment to rush forward like a ghost, gripping his knife tight, his wild eyes evident behind a mad smile. He leaned in close, taunting as he saw Taeha momentarily distracted. Not the time to lose focus, right? But as Nameless closed in, Taeha unleashed a thunderous kick, sending his opponent flying backward down the long street. Taeha stood up amid the dust and shattered glass, his body stained with blood but his eyes still bright and resilient. Brushing the blood off his sleeve, Taeha said in a low voice, "These loyalists are no joke. Anyone else would have died from that amount of poison." Taeha looked up, surprised as Nameless appeared quickly after a single call. Taeha sneered, teasing, "Jealous, feeling like he's treated me better than you all these years." Nameless denied gruff, stomping on a utility pole, admitting only surprise that Gwangsu was still alive. Taeha turned his head, eyes alert as he heard a cracking sound behind him. Above, Nameless yanked hard on a utility pole, creating a terrifying screech. Taeha stood below, ready to confront. Taeha was stunned to realize Nameless had uprooted the entire utility pole from the ground. The large utility pole crashed onto the street after a fierce collision, causing an explosion that shook the entire neighborhood. Electricity from the severed cables sparked continuously, setting the pavement ablaze, signaling imminent danger. Taeha startled and turned around as lightning bolts shot toward him like an angry serpent. Traffic lights flickered, and the entire area's electrical system began to malfunction. A furious shout rang out from afar. "Fighting again, want to destroy the whole neighborhood." Nameless charged forward with his knife in hand, smirking provocatively. "Can you tap dance, huh?" Amid the crackling electricity, Taeha and Nameless clashed, blades flashing swiftly with each lightning-fast strike. Nameless attacked while sneering provocatively, reminding Taeha of his past defeat at Junsubeek's hand. Taeha did not respond to the taunts but focused on counterattack, his eyes silently full of determination. A power line was knocked loose, sparking fire, making the space even more perilous. Taeha took advantage of the chaotic rhythm, leaping high to escape the enemy's reach. But Nameless was waiting, appearing behind him in midair, raising his knife to strike down with a cruel final remark. "See, you're pitifully weak." The fierce collision sent Taeha flying through the rooftop of a building. He slid along the dark corridor, slowing down while silently admitting the opponent was too strong. Before he could stabilize, Nameless rushed in like a whirlwind, his eyes full of killing intent. Taeha reacted in time, their blades clashing continuously, sparks flying in the narrow corridor. Despite being cautious, Taeha couldn't understand Nameless. He seemed to anticipate every move he made. Every step Taeha took was anticipated by Nameless with a speed like teleportation, tipping the battle increasingly in his favor. Taeha realized Nameless's attacks, though fierce, were still within his ability to counter. He recalled the past, when Nameless had disguised himself perfectly for years without revealing any flaw. Taeha's mind was filled with doubts about why someone with such a sharp blade would resort to poison. Taeha drew his knife with a cold gaze, the light reflecting off the blade confirming his readiness to kill. He silently wondered, does he truly understand what a real assassin is? That question echoed back, pulling Taeha into the memory of a cryptic conversation in an office. A woman sat with her legs crossed on the desk, calmly analyzing. She asserted that an assassin and a murderer are two different things, only one is for hire. In a cold tone, she continued explaining, modern assassination relies on science. From poison to drones, every tool can become a weapon. Taeha listened attentively. She added that professional assassinations are costly, not only killing the target but also erasing all traces. Taeha confidently objected, claiming that method was no different from his, but she snapped, criticizing him for being careless enough to leave blood on the wall. Taeha began piecing everything together. He suspected the recent assassination request was just a prearranged trap. She confirmed the suspicion. The government wanted to kill the target and conveniently eliminate the executor, killing two birds with one stone. The woman with a sinister smile hypothesized, if there was an assassin who always killed targets without leaving traces, how powerful would the organization behind him be? Taeha was stunned, sweat rolling down his cheek, as part of the truth gradually revealed itself, leaving him confused. Nameless, with a mad smile, charged like a living blade, embodying the terrifying power the woman mentioned. Taeha softly repeated, "Assassin," and began connecting all of Nameless's actions, the full picture gradually emerging. Taeha realized Nameless's speed wasn't teleportation, but the ability to disappear and reappear deliberate like a skilled magician. If toppling the utility pole was just bait to lure him into the dark area, then all of Nameless's actions were deliberate plans, trapping Taeha perfectly. Nameless smirked slightly, admitting he had resigned himself to a rotten life here until the end. But Taeha appeared, pulling him out of that miserable fate like a chance to live again. Nameless looked up at his opponent, slowly understanding why Jin and Junsubeek had imprisoned him for so many years. Taeha coldly replied that what they wanted was a silent assassin, not a beast rushing into a brawl. Nameless's eyes blazed red, anger erupting like a fire long suppressed. The light cast onto the unusually silent floor seemed to count down the moments before violence would erupt. Nameless collapsed onto the wooden floor, bloodied and battered, his body no longer able to withstand the brutal blow. On the upper floor, a tall man stood silently observing from afar, his cold gaze falling like an invisible sentinel. Nameless tried to raise his hand, trembling as he begged, desperately clinging to the faint hope of continuing the fight. The silver-haired man responded coldly, affirming he had seen enough and that all had only brought great disappointment. Nameless sat slumped on the floor, his face covered in blood, stunned as he was scolded for letting himself be distracted by those beyond his reach. A long-haired man appeared, his presence imposing and pressuring, bluntly declaring that Nameless would never become someone like Dujio. Nameless roared in anger, eyes wide open. He refused to be judged so easily by others. He targeted Taeha directly, insulting him as a coward who was abandoned and unworthy of judging others. In a rage, Nameless charged forward, vowing to return, take Taeha's head, and force everyone to acknowledge him once again. The strike shattered the ground, marking the boundary between today's humiliation and tomorrow's resolve for revenge. The red light blinked in the elevator as Nameless rushed in without hesitation, retreating in chaos with eyes blazing with killing intent. His face showed alertness. Something unusual had just touched his consciousness, causing him to freeze amid the enveloping red light. Taeha coldly reached out, pressed the elevator door close, but a decisive action signaling the start of an inevitable confrontation. Nameless stared at him, his voice deliberate and measured. He had given a chance, but the other didn't know what he was facing. In response, Taeha drew his knife, his gaze unwavering. This time, he would be the one to strike first.